me some pivot, man.
Hey, everybody out there. Welcome to the Crushing Defeat podcast. Episode 3 is Identity. My name is Blake Richards. With me is Dan Burrington.
Hello.
And so, Dan, is it going to be identity or identity? I know we talked about that before. How are we going to say this word throughout
I
the
say
show?
identity.
Identity? I think so, too. I think it rolls off the tongue a little bit better than identity. All right. Identity. I'm going to mess it up now. Identity it is. Before we get started, Dan, I did want to give a shout out to Adonis Younglove. It's Aadonis Younglove, just like it sounds, Younglove. Adonis is from Lansing, Michigan, and he is the producer of all of the music that we use for our intro and outro to our podcast.
I like all of his stuff, but the intro is awesome.
Yeah, I like it a lot too, and I've gotten a lot of really good feedback on it. Definitely want to give him a shout out. Let everyone know where you can find him, so you can go to SoundCloud and look up Adonis Younglove and find all of his beats.
Fat beats.
Fat beats.
Fat boots.
All right.
No, that's good.
So episode 3 is all about identity, and we're going to be talking about a few things regarding identity. So what is your social or online identity and the digital footprint that we all leave? And I think people are, somewhere on a range of being very concerned about their digital footprint down to not concerned at all, or to your point, not knowing what digital footprint means and the impact that it can have. We're also going to talk about generational identity, baby boomers and Generation X, and of course millennials, which is the generation that everyone's talking about. And then we're going to round it off by talking about identity theft and some interesting things that are going on regarding identity theft and how, just about anyone's full videoscopic identity, it's not a word, but it can be taken, it can be stolen.
It's English, man. We can make whatever word we want.
Yeah, that's fair.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to call it videotropic, which makes absolutely no sense, but I like the sound of it.
That is good too. I'll be scopic, you're tropic. Awesome. So first we're going to talk a little bit about online or social identity and the digital footprint that we all leave out there in cyberspace. And your digital footprint gets used for a lot of different things.
Well, it's different now. If you're an employer, these two guys are very similar. What's going to be the tiebreaker? And then you hop on social media and you find out that Craig is a alcoholic and that Mike spends most of his time at church groups, and depending upon what kind of employer you are, you may go with one or the other based on the information that you find out. But it's never been like this before. We haven't ever left a trail before. So before the internet and before social media became a thing, your trail was your taxes. That was a record that you kept, your birth certificate, your social security number. Your bills, like the paper copies of your bills, that was something that could be tracked. But now it's everything. So I broke down my digital footprint. First and foremost, I will say ahead of time, I am kind of a Google guy. I am a Google guy. I like Google. A lot of what I say has to do with that because that's the service ecosystem that I use the most of. I also use Facebook. So Facebook does have a digital footprint, a wide digital footprint, and it's difficult to completely remove it. So if you put a post up of me and you tag Dan in that picture, I would have to go through each one of those pictures, tag Dan, request that they be removed. If I want to delete myself from Facebook, Facebook makes it very difficult for me to do so. They also give you the option, and I'm giving air quotes here, option of downloading your digital footprint from Facebook, meaning all of the communications that you've had, all of the pictures that you've uploaded. But I take issue with it because I decided to do that today. My digital footprint since I think 2008 was when I joined Facebook, maybe 2009.
Yeah.
My digital footprint, 22 megabytes. I call horseshit.
Yeah, that's not a lot.
It's not a lot at all. But it
Is
was
it all just because it's text-based? Is that
text-based, but
why?
you're supposed to be able to download your pictures as well as a part of that.
Okay.
If you want to delete your Facebook account, say, I want to get rid of Facebook, number one, you have to find it in basically you have to go through all this miasma to get to the nitty-gritty and find the page that you have to go to. And even then, from what I've read, it's not really deleted. Like they basically cut your account out of their system, but they retain all of your information.
You're absolutely right. That is a fact because there have been a few times where I have shut down my Facebook account. There was one time, it was like a year at least, where I had it canceled and I went back to it and logged in and everything was still there. None of it was gone. So you're right. That kind of bothers me how much Facebook makes you keep that digital footprint out there.
But it makes you keep it, but we also sign on for it. There's the terms and conditions page.
Of course.
Every time you install software, every time you install a computer game, every time you set up an Xbox or turn on a DVD player, you're accepting terms and conditions,
right?
Which nobody reads because number one, you got to be a lawyer to understand it. Number two, it's 42 pages long usually.
Yeah, and you have to do it in order to use it.
Yeah, and they've talked about this, that there's been a few lawsuits that have been brought against it because you don't do the terms and conditions when you purchase it.
Right.
You do the terms and conditions when you try to use it. So I buy this software and then I go to install it and then I go to use it and it says, hey, if you want to use this stuff that you can't return now because it's software, please accept our terms and conditions.
Yeah.
Kind of horseshit.
And it makes sense for something that you spend money on, but where it's troubling is when it's something that's supposed to be a free service. And I get it. Facebook needs to make money. Google needs to make money, and that's how they do it. They're data miners, and we've talked about that before. But it's still pretty irritating that you don't have as much control over what does and does not get put where, and that it is such a challenge to erase portions of your digital footprint. Don't you think it's going to get better and that there are more robust security settings and things that you can do than, even 5 years ago?
I think it's going to get worse because, every program that you get now, every app on your phone says sign in with Facebook. You can sign in with your Facebook account. And they make it so easy because your Facebook saves your password. If you have it stored on your computer or stored on your phone. I don't want to make a username. I don't want to make a password. Well, when it does that, not only do you become part of this new apps info center with all of your Facebook information, but that's one more way that Facebook can access your information. And that's kind of skyrocketed in terms of the applications that allow you to sign in with Facebook.
I never do that. I always create a new account.
Yeah.
I always create a new account.
Sometimes I'm lazy and I'm just beat tired and I, capitulate. And you can go in and you can remove that. Now, I also went on Google because I do a lot of my stuff with Google. I use Android phones. I use Gmail as my main source of email.
Yep.
So if you go to Google and all you have to do is you Google it. You Google Dashboard, or you can go into settings and go under Dashboard from there. And it's kind of eye-opening, especially if you use Google products for a lot of things. It breaks down all of the information that Google has on you. To be fair, Google does make it extremely easy to wipe that information. So if you want to wipe it, they do not have a barrier to that. You just select what you want to delete and get rid of it. But I want to go through a couple things that I had in my Google account under my one email address with them.
Okay.
So Google Alerts are things that I sign up for, like I want to know when there's Detroit Lions news. I'm not a closet Detroit Lions fan. I'm a Lions fan.
That's awesome.
Android devices. So every Android device I've ever had, they have a record of it. Android backups, so any app that has a backup system on it. Any books that I bought through the Play Store. Any music that I uploaded to their system or games that I purchased. Or any music that I purchased as well. Google Finance is a tool that you can use. Google Plus. 3 of us used it, I think, total. Yep. You and I were 2 of them, and then there was this guy, Steve, that we weren't really friends with.
Yeah.
It was an awkward week and a half.
Steve Greenberg.
Yeah. So Google Plus is on there. And again, if you want to completely eliminate your Google Plus account, you can do it from there.
Yeah.
But this is where it starts getting to the nitty-gritty. So Contacts. Your contacts, when you save them in an Android phone, they're saved to your Google account, which I have found is a blessing because if everything gets wiped, you have it all there.
Right.
But when I delete them from my phone, they stay on my Google account. I have 625 Google contacts.
Who are those people?
A lot of them are just email addresses. Some of it is people that I don't talk to, like they're old coworkers from way, way back in the day, like when you and I first met each other.
Yeah.
Way, way back. Emails. 11,000 emails.
You can still get to your emails?
I can still get to my emails.
Did you never empty your trash, or does that
I emptied
not
my
matter?
trash, but there's still 11,000 there, and I didn't get all the way into that. Google News, like all of the news searches that I did.
Okay.
Bookmarks, because I use Chrome. So anytime that I set up a bookmark and have it in that system, it goes across all my devices, which again is a nice tool. But there are 185 bookmarks stored. If I see like a recipe, because I like to cook, I'll store that recipe, and then when I put it into my little recipe app, but they stay on there. So I've got 185 bookmarks. And this one I wiped, and it freaked me out. I use Google Wallet a lot for payments. There was a record of 618 on my Google account.
From apps and movies and stuff that you
From
bought?
apps, movies, things of that nature.
Yeah, okay.
Photos. 12,000 photos. And then we're going to get to the two super duper creepy ones. So GPS maps, you can go through. It's creepy or interesting or both, depending upon how you look at it. If you're a stalker, great tool. You can go in there, pull out a map of the United States, and it basically makes red dots everywhere that you've been since you've had GPS on your phone. You can delete it by year or you can delete all of it, but you can go in there and every time that you've used GPS or any time that you've used location-based services, it puts a little red blip on the map and it shows you there.
Yeah.
It's pretty scary. It's like I was seeing stuff like Lafayette, Indiana, and I was like, I've never been there. And then I looked at the date and I was like, oh yeah, I was there. I stopped there, on my way to such and such way, way back in the day. All of that information is there. Slightly scarier than that, if you use Google Voice to search for things, so you hit the little microphone, it says beep, and you say navigate to Five Guys Burgers and Fries. Not only does it record what you searched for, it also records all of the audio. So I was able to go 2 years back and listen to my own voice ask for directions to this doctor. Or one of them was like, how many carbs are in a Big Mac or something like that. Like all of these weird audio searches.
It records and keeps that.
It records and keeps it. So your voice is held on your Google account.
And you love listening to your own voice.
I hate listening to my own voice. Ladies and gentlemen, if I listen to this podcast, I cringe or close my ears whenever I'm talking. Nobody likes the sound of their own voice, but I hate the sound of my own voice. So 22 megabytes was my Facebook footprint. Guess how big my Google footprint was? This does not include music.
I don't know, 4 gigabytes?
42 gigabytes.
42 gigabytes.
42 gigabytes. Now, they do let you download that.
Okay.
So you say, I want to download my digital footprint. This is if you were going to leave Google for whatever reason and you wanted that information before you deleted it.
Mm-hmm.
It took 4 hours for Google servers to get that set. And then it emailed me and it said, it's all set. And there were 24 files. They were all zip files and they were all 2 gigabytes.
Wow.
Some of them were like halvesy because it's all based on category and stuff. But yeah, it was nuts. So your online identity is massive. It doesn't matter if you don't use Gmail. If you use another service, especially like if you're using Office 365 through work, it's very similar. They record all your calendar information. It records all of your incoming calls if you're using that in conjunction with Office. It is being recorded. Everything that we do today is recorded in one way, shape, or form.
Well, and props to Google for letting you have access to all of that and being able to go through memory lane and see the places that you had been and stuff like that. I know there are some parts that were concerning, but what's concerning to me are the, Facebooks and stuff that make it more difficult or even impossible to see what they have on you. So I guess that's what's nice about the Google footprint is for a lot of people, it's probably the biggest, but it's also the most transparent.
Well, if you look at where they want to go with technology, and it's not just Google, but Facebook and Microsoft as well. Like Microsoft bought Skype. Microsoft is trying to build a augmented reality headset to go along with Xbox and PC.
Yeah.
Facebook bought Oculus or invested $2 billion, which is basically buying them
Right.
into VR headsets because they want you to be able to, they want us to do VR chat between one another and hang out. Like, I don't want to go over to Blake's house. Why don't I just put on my headset and we'll just hang out together that way?
Yeah.
And then, that information, when we talk about the beer that we like or what we're doing for the weekend, that will get sold to a marketing company. And this is conjecture. I'm throwing this out there. But, that information sold to a marketing company so that they know that guys of our age listen to this type of music and like this type of beer, and they can sell that information.
Yeah.
It's becoming less and less of a private thing and more of a public thing, or at least a public to the corporations that you deal with.
Right. And hopefully not attached to your name and all that kind of stuff. At least that's what we get told all the time, is that it's all just sent as random big data. But did you see, or were you able to, get any idea of what parts of your Google footprint are being used for any reason? Like, did you see?
No, they don't supply that information. You can get a pretty good guess as to it. I think a lot of it is not like, what does Dan Burrington do on a daily basis? Hey,
but where does
Crest,
he go?
Crest toothpaste. You want to know about Dan Burrington? No, but it's going to say, hey, we're looking for what a guy in his mid-30s likes to do with his time, or again, what kind of beer does he drink? What kind of car does he drive?
Yeah.
What does he do between the hours of 5 and 7? Because companies do that. They'll go to Google and they'll say, we're interested in a female demographic between 20 and 25 years old that's very active. What kind of music do they listen to, and what kind of drinks do they like? And Google is one of maybe 3 or 4 companies in the world that's poised to say, yeah, give us 2 hours. We'll go into our information, pull that for you, and get it to you. Mm-hmm. And that information is invaluable. Like ad companies in the 80s, they had nothing like that.
No.
There was nothing available, even
focus groups.
Yeah.
Focus groups. Get, a dozen people in a room and ask them what they think and hope they tell the truth, and groupthink doesn't come into it and all that.
And I know they still do focus groups, but I feel like it's this dying art form.
Oh, yeah. The efficacy of it is way diminished. I mean, groupthink's a real problem. So one person says, yeah, I really like that. And subconsciously, the rest of the group thinks on some level, ooh, they like it. I don't want to be different. I really like it too. Or conversely, I don't like it. So, with the data mining and the digital footprint, you get the real story about what people really do. Similarly to what we talked about with biohacking last episode, where you can't fake that. The lurking variables don't exist to get in the way of that. What about parents and what they're doing to their kids' digital footprint?
It's interesting that you say that, because when my kid was born, I talked to my wife and I was like, I'm going to set up a Gmail account for him so he has it. We could set up a Facebook. Now, I didn't bring that up, but I know people have done it.
Yeah.
And when I said that I was going to make him a Gmail account, my wife stopped me. She's like, that's not necessary. We don't need to do that. He doesn't need that right now. And it's a really good point. Mm-hmm. But people do make Facebook pages for their 2-year-old. People do post their kid doing stupid stuff all the time. And it's going to be this weird thing when we're older and, you're 25 years old, and instead of looking like we did at old Polaroids and, crappy 35 millimeter photos, we're going to be looking at these digital photos that don't degrade and are available at all times and just sitting on servers. That's what the kids of today are going to look forward to, for better or possibly for worse.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I would think both. I think it would be nice, like you said, that the photos don't degrade and that digital historic record is pristine. The other side of it, though, is, maybe the teenager does something dumb. We all did dumb stuff when we were teenagers. And the parent goes right onto Facebook and posts, you wouldn't believe what my kid did last night. They went out and drank, got wrecked, and came home all vomity. Tag, Billy Smith. And then, it's tagged to their name. The parent's trying to embarrass their kid or whatever by blowing it up on Facebook. Little do they know, 10 years from now, there's going to be an employer Google searching Billy or whatever, and they're going to find that.
Billy, you dumb bastard.
You are not getting this job at Burger King at all.
Sorry, Billy.
You are not fit for employment at
Get out.
the King.
I said get out, sir.
You can't work at the Burger King ever. So yeah, parents out there, please don't destroy your kids' futures by giving them an embarrassing digital footprint. Or, there's more innocent ones too. We've all probably got that picture in our parents' photo album in the bathtub where we have no clothes on, right? I'm sure you have that picture. I know I have that picture.
Yeah.
And I've seen other people's that picture. So I know it's a thing. And just imagine parents putting that out there.
Well, there was a girl who got abducted, and this is just coming to mind. I don't have my information on this, but a girl that got abducted, but the guy that abducted her knew where to find her because his mom had Facebook open to not just her friends, but everybody.
Okay.
And based off of pictures and based off of posts, because like most parents, she did a billion posts of her kid, like, oh, here's her first day of school, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
He showed up and picked her up from school. Now, they found the kid, so good job there, I guess. But that just goes to show that's one more tool in the belt of freak
evil.
shows.
You're talking about your digital footprint, and we looked at mine earlier. I can tell you I've been a little bit grumpy about mine, and I'm pretty conservative about as much as I can control it, of course, because we don't have full control over all of it. But normal humans can't get to every inch of my Facebook page. Anytime Google asks me for location access, I deny it. In fact, I don't use Google Maps, I use Waze. So I try to do things to be a little bit guarded about my social footprint and manage it. And there are actually companies out there that you can pay to manage your digital footprint in a professional manner. So you can go to XYZ company and pay them XY dollars, and they will go in and for you remove anything that could potentially be embarrassing, help you build up the more professional, probably the most open piece of my digital footprint is LinkedIn, because that's the professional part. And the job I have now, I actually got because of it. They reached out to me proactively because they came across my LinkedIn profile. So I do try really hard to be conscious and cognizant of what is portrayed in my digital footprint.
It's interesting that you say that, because there's a college recently that students were protesting. The students got pepper sprayed. They're all like arm linked together, all sitting down. It was all peaceful, but they weren't moving.
Yeah.
And a campus cop, walked up to these kids. I mean, walked up, like waltzed up, and shot a stream of pepper spray right into this girl's face. Not even active about it. Not like, ooh, I'm going to get you. Just like casually took out his can, casually sprayed this girl in the face with pepper spray. And the college paid $175,000 to keep their name out of social media with it. There was a firm that came up to them and said, hey, if you're not happy with the way that this is being portrayed, pay us some money and we will do our best to contain this situation. And of course, it's the internet, so it just blew up anyways.
It didn't work, right?
Yeah.
Like if you search for it now, it's still the first stuff that comes
Actually,
up.
if you search for $175,000 cover-up, it'll show up immediately.
So is it like blew up? Yeah, I did hear about that, and that was terrible. Kind of feel bad. I mean, look, it happened, hold that individual accountable and make that the message, not I'm trying to cover it up. So I don't necessarily feel bad for them, except for the amount of money that they put out there that has to come from somewhere, tuition,
that's
whatever.
Tuition or state aid or however you want to look at it.
Hopefully it didn't come from any of our tax dollars, but Land Grant University, a lot of that money does come from our taxes. And and it didn't even work. It functionally failed and made it worse.
Yeah, well, we talked about children and how it relates to technology. Younger folk, the millennial generation, they're the ones that grew up on the internet. Like they're growing up with iPads now.
Yeah.
Stuff that we never even dreamed of when we were little kids. So that goes to another type of identity, generational identity.
Yep. And what's interesting about generational identity? So if you think about what organization would dictate United States generations, it would be the Census Bureau. They are the guardians of the population from a statistical,
Categorical.
yeah,
Yeah.
viewpoint. The only generation that the Census Bureau acknowledges is the baby boomers. All of the other generations that we hear about are fictitious, made up.
They're unsanctioned.
Yeah, unsanctioned, not even real. But to that point, there are a few that stuck, but some that didn't. Netters was a generation that was a thing for a minute.
That sounds horrible.
Generation X2. So we're
The
Generation
sequel.
X. Yeah, is like X-Men 2,
Mhm.
Generation X2. The 13th generation,
Okay,
Baby Busters was another one. It's not
Okay,
bad. It's
yeah.
not bad. And one that's actually pretty commonly known that's fallen off is Generation Y. So that was a thing for a while, and now it doesn't get used. But my favorite generational name that fell off is the Trophy Kids.
The Trophy Kids?
The Trophy Kids.
Is
And
that like soccer moms?
It's like from the generation after ours, it's now
Oh,
millennials.
shit. I know what this is.
And it's
Everybody gets a trophy.
Yes, it's the everybody gets
by
a
the
trophy.
by, kids. That's bullshit.
Yeah.
Not everybody doesn't get a trophy. When I was in the Pinewood Derby and I crushed my competition and made them cry tears and I got that first place trophy, that was my trophy. I earned it. Now
That's
you
right.
get a ribbon.
All of it.
You get a participation medal.
Yeah.
Congratulations, you participated. That's horseshit.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. So I can see why they got rid of it, but still, people got feisty about that one. But interesting to consider. But here, the White House, which I would also say is a pretty good source to look at generational names and dates and things like that. So that's what we're going to stick with for this episode 3, Identity. The first one's the Silent Generation, and that's 1928 to 1945.
I want to call that the greatest generation. I will refer to them as the greatest
generation. That's fair. They were pretty great. Baby boomers, 46 to 64. Generation X, which is who we belong to, 1965 to 1980. Millennials, 1980 to 2004. And the newest one that a lot of people probably haven't heard about is the Homeland Generation, which is 2005 to present. And the thought is the generation that came after 9/11, that was born after 9/11. And the name Homeland actually came from a contest, came from the Washington Post, but the term Homeland comes from a couple of different things. It's biblical. The Nazis used it a lot to refer to Germany in World War II because they were kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
So they would refer to Germany as the homeland. And then obviously, George Bush with 9/11 started using Homeland Security, and it became, again, a part of the nomenclature.
I'm going to call bullshit on Homeland only because it's supposed to be from 2004 to now.
Yeah.
Neither of us knew about it. I feel like we are both generally somewhat learned.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they're just trying to make it happen. It's not going to happen, Washington Post.
Oh,
It's not going to happen. Nobody
I think
knows
it's gonna
that.
nobody knows it.
Nobody knows
I
it.
think it'll stick. I saw it in a couple
No, they're
different
just going to
places.
stay with millennials. Millennials are going to be
Everybody.
Millennials, we like to blame you for stuff. It's
Yeah.
like, fucking millennials. That is something you will hear for the rest of your life growing
of course. Of course. NPR did a study, legitimate 40%, I love you millennials, 40% of millennials say that breakfast cereal is not a viable breakfast meal because you have to dirty a bowl and a spoon.
It's wasteful.
And it's work. Why not just grab a power bar or whatever? That's the thought. The thought is, why not create garbage with a disposable
So
package?
thanks, millennials. Now we're
Yeah.
going to get that piece of gum that, what's her name had in...
I have no idea what you're talking about.
The Willy Wonka.
I don't remember. I know what you're talking about, but I don't remember.
Yeah, and she had the whole meal in the cube. She's like, it's a whole meal in a piece of gum. And she lost her mind because it was so delicious and there was pot roast and then they didn't have the dessert worked out. She turned into a big blueberry.
I remember turning into a big blueberry
Yeah.
part. That was that visual stands
There's
out
roast
in my
beef,
mind.
mashed potatoes,
Yeah.
corn, and then blueberry pie.
Yeah. All you hear about everywhere is how companies want to get millennials to spend their money with their company, and everyone's trying to market to and find the secret way to crack the code of millennials. And I don't know why it's presented as this huge challenge.
Well, if you think about it, there are a lot of cultural things that are going to go along with that. But that's
Yep.
what people are trying to do, is make this generational zodiac and say, how can we sell to millennials? How
Right.
can we sell to baby boomers?
Yep.
Because they all think the same, right? And it's not really the case, because you've got a
No.
lot of weird people. You're not going to be able to encapsulate a whole generation with your slogan or,
Mhm.
pizza that has hot dogs wrapped into it.
Or bowl and spoonless breakfast cereal.
Well, you got the millennials with that, 40% of them apparently.
Yeah, but if we could invent that, a way to have breakfast cereal without bowl or spoon,
Mm-hmm.
it's like a plastic recyclable jug, all right?
Mm-hmm.
And in the top half is the milk and in the bottom half is the cereal.
Mm-hmm.
And you pull this divider out from the center
Mm-hmm.
and the milk comes down onto the cereal,
Crushingdefeat.com.
crushingdefeat.com, and you just straight drink the cereal out of the bottle and
You
then you
slam
throw it in the recycle bin.
You slam it. It's
Done.
It's efficient, delicious, usually.
Yep. And it stays fresh because the milk and the cereal are separated until that time as you pull that ripcord or whatever. We'll call it ripcord, trademark crushingdefeat.com. And you pull the ripcord and boom.
Rather than boom, I would say boosh. Boosh!
Boosh, boosh. But you're absolutely right. And that's why the only one that the Census Bureau recognizes is the baby boomers. World War II was a big deal. People came home.
And they all
they
had
got
babies.
to doing the stuff.
Yeah.
You know
You
know
can
how,
say sex.
you know where
You're a grown
babies
man.
come from, right?
I do.
Okay. All right. So they came home and they did that. Birds, bees, all of that business. And a lot of people were born.
Yeah.
And that's legitimate. You can't question that.
Yeah, well, it's a dividing line. Now, I
Mhm.
would say that the internet is a clear dividing line as well. The information age is something that we can really look at. Like, you can
Yeah.
look at the industrial age. It's kind of a gray area a little bit, like, okay, was it the Model T that started the industrial age? Was it the steel industry that started the industrial age? The information age, it's pretty clear. Like, it was
Yeah.
the 90s.
Yeah.
It was the internet. And then it just kind of exploded from there.
Right.
So I think that with the millennials, baby boomers were a pretty big group in terms of the time frame that they call them baby boomers.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be the same with millennials as well, is that, this is the point of debarkation. This is,
Mhm.
there's going to have to be another big change before we really single out another generation.
And that's fair because we, depending on the study that you look at, some groups think we are millennials. But there is a blurred line there because although we didn't have the tech from birth, we still grew up with the tech. I mean, I remember I was in high school when the first computer lab went into the school. I mean, I was that old when 12 computers in one room. And I remember when teachers finally started to get computers in the classrooms, and that was kind of a big deal. But they would bring us down to the library and teach us how to use web crawler. And the difference, you remember web crawler?
Yeah,
Had the
yeah.
little spider. And they would teach us the difference between, if you put and in between the words or. Now none of that matters. But it used to be a big deal how you entered
Yeah, there
the
was
term.
syntax
Yeah.
in terms of your search, and
Yeah.
you would put things in quotations like,
Yep.
but now everything is contextual, and
Right.
the search engine is super smart and it knows. But back then, I mean, that was a point, like when I was a kid and we had networked computers, so not on the internet per se,
Mm-hmm.
but networked on a school network drive. Me and my friends, there was a game called Flight of the Intruder. We installed it on the network drive. And then when we were supposed to be doing computer class, which was boring as hell, we would be playing networked games of Flight of the Intruder against one another.
Yeah.
Yeah. But our teachers had no idea what we were doing, and they didn't care either. They were sitting at the front of the class. They're like, okay, here's a computer program. You just do this computer program. We're like, yeah, sure, okay. And then we would go in, hit the executable because we knew how to use computers. They did not as much.
Yeah.
And then we would play a video game all class long.
Which is pretty sweet.
It was pretty sweet. I
Pretty
enjoyed it.
sweet. Pretty ingenious. The youngest Americans, whether you call them Generation Z, Homeland, the millennials, they tend to be even more so coddled than any generation or safe, right? You've got to be in a car seat until you're 40 some inches tall or something crazy like that, where I remember when I was young, probably 9 or 10 or 11, and I was riding around in a pickup truck. Seatbelts didn't work. I'm with this lady. There was like 5 of us in the front seat. We go through a light, and the door popped open. And I was leaning against the door, and I'm starting to fall out, and it all happened in slow motion. Like I'm just, and I'm grabbing crap that's in the seat, and I'm trying to grab people, whatever I can do to keep myself. And I slow-mo fell out of the truck and rolled into the intersection, and cars were like screeching around me.
How have I never heard this story?
I don't know, but it's a pretty good story. And I didn't get really hurt or anything. We were going slow enough, but I was reading that, and it made me think about that story. Like that would never happen today. Kids are facing the opposite direction. They don't even get to look out the window. They get to look at the back of the seat, just because the impact, it's safer to get pushed back than to get pushed forward. And, back when we were growing up, who cares?
Or you did get hit by a car.
I did get hit by a car
Everything
too,
up until this point is just this weird simulation inside your brain that your brain is doing to cope with the coma that you're in right now. The internet is not real. This podcast and the people listening to it, I'm sorry, people.
Yep.
They are all figments of your imagination. No. I'm not real.
Okay.
I just depressed the shit out of myself. I'm a figment of your imagination because you fell out of a truck.
I would invent someone like you, but I do have one question, Dan. What the fuck is the internet?
What the fuck is the internet?
What is the internet?
Are you serious?
No, I know what the internet is.
It's a network of computers, man.
Yeah, in servers. I know what the internet is.
Servers and whatnot. Yeah. Internet backbones.
And what's not? You mean there's not an internet? Like you can't go and take a pilgrimage to the internet, climb a big mountain, camp out for days, and finally get to the summit of the mountain, and in front of you there's a big sign like the Hollywood Hills that says the internet.
We kind of do have that, sort of.
And Gandalf is guarding it with his staff. Yeah.
They laid down Wall Street. I'm saying Wall Street as a collective entity, but to get closer to the internet, to shave off microseconds, so millionths of a second, they laid fiber optic cable from Chicago to New York so that they had just a little bit more of an edge on financial decisions, because that's that much. Being the fastest guy was super important and is super important.
Of course.
So
by
is,
micros of a second.
Like we do kind of in a abstract way, we worship the internet god and we want to be close to him.
So the steel case pyramid?
Yeah.
Did you hear that's getting turned into a big
server
data
farm,
center?
Yeah, giant server farm.
Yeah, which is kind of cool because we're strategic. Well, that's what made me think of you. You're talking about New York and Chicago and, Milwaukee and all. We are strategically located in Grand Rapids to allow for faster internet to a lot of those big markets.
For people that do not know, in Grand Rapids or on the south side of Grand Rapids, a furniture company, Steelcase, they made... We call it the pyramid. I think it has a different name, but it's a 4-sided pyramid building that used to be office space, and now they're turning it into a server farm.
Yeah. So the safety piece, getting back to just a few kind of interesting things about that. So you've heard of Pew Research, right? Pew Research is it's reputable, right? Like a Gallup poll, it's reputable.
Yeah.
High school students that said they've had at least one drink of alcohol that year. In 1991, it was 82%. In 2013, it was 66%. That is a big drop. Never or rarely wear a seatbelt. 1991, 26%. 2013, 8%. So it's, the generations are even getting more safety conscious themselves. And I don't know, I've noticed that a lot of teenagers are waiting longer to get their driver's license, and it's not as big of a deal to them. And I think it's because when we were growing up, what did getting that driver's license mean to you when you turned 16?
Yeah, it was freedom. It was, I get to go, wherever. And of course, we both lived somewhat in rural towns for the most part. Yeah. And if you needed to get anywhere, you had to ride your bike. Or if you wanted to get to town, like if you wanted to get into the giant city of Grand Rapids, then you had to have an automobile or know somebody who did. So it was freedom. It was freedom to have your driver's license.
Your social life required being physically in the presence of one another. Now that is completely unnecessary. especially as you're talking about VR becoming more. Soon I'm going to be able to virtually hang out with you and not have to be
But I hate that
present.
though. And I think it's a generational
It
difference
is. It
because
is.
like you don't text me a ton. I have friends that text me all the time
Yeah.
and I have other friends that like to call me on the phone all the time. And these are friends that I love. Like I
Mhm.
love talking to these people. I don't like talking on the phone. I hate text messaging. Like I'll text back and forth if it's a funny exchange, but that's it. Like 4 or 5 lines is like, okay, I'm tired.
Right.
I don't want to type anymore. And I would rather like if you're like, hey, let's talk about the podcast. Let's talk about XYZ. I would rather hop in my car,
Mhm.
drive 15 minutes to your house than have a 5-minute exchange in text because to me, that's exhausting to go through all that texting when I could just say verbally what I want to say.
Yeah.
But this generation, the younger generation, they don't feel that way as much. They feel like they can communicate in text. It's like the people keep saying it's the death of language. I don't think it's the death of language. I think it's just this natural progression towards binary for the most
Right.
part.
More efficiency in communication,
Yeah.
saying more and doing with less. And I think there's positives to it and there's, opportunities there. I will be interested to see what becomes socially acceptable in the future. For example, 10 years ago, online dating was kind of considered a, on the fringe type of thing. And a lot of people were embarrassed. And now it's how the majority of people meet.
And there's a billion of them too. There's like
Yeah.
hookup sites. Like I just want like, I guess Tinder's less of that now, but there's
Right.
other sites, I guess, that you can do that with.
Yeah, like
There's,
I want to cheat on everybody.com.
yeah, there's jewishsingles.com,
Yeah.
farmersingles.com,
Yeah, Christian Mingle.
Christian Mingle. Yeah, that is out there.
It's insane how, again, what's acceptable is changing. So I'll give you another example that I found interesting. My nephew, he's early teens, right?
Yeah.
And he had a party and had all these kids over or whatever. And my sister took a picture of him with his friends sitting on the couch. They're all together. They're in the same room, texting on the phones. But what made it even more awesome is they were texting each other. It's funny because you just said very passionately the exact opposite of that, right? I don't want to do that. I will get in my car and I will drive the 15 minutes
Yeah,
or
which
whatever to
makes
have
me
the
the old
conversation.
man, the
Yeah.
old guy that's like,
Yeah.
in my day,
Right?
in my day, we only texted when we absolutely had to.
Yeah. Yeah. And now you've got these 4, young adults sitting in a row, text messaging on their phones to each other, and it's completely normal.
Well, to get to that, you were talking about like a change in language, and I said the
Yeah.
death of language. But if you think about Shakespearean English, like wherefore art thou, Romeo, like nobody talks like that
Yeah.
anymore. And we look at that as very archaic. And if you go to Old English, it's even more archaic, but you can pick out pieces of it.
Mhm.
I think we're going to see in the next, actually we'll be dead, but in the next 100 years, there's going to be this giant shift. Blade Runner, if you watch Blade Runner, totally ahead of its time. But there's this street talk that they use in Blade Runner that is a mixture of Japanese, Spanish, and English that is meant to be like, abbreviated efficient speak that happens over the course of the next 100 years because of technology.
Yeah.
And because generation, Homeland or whatever has embraced it so much.
Yep. So another thing you and I talked about when we were preparing for the show that I wanted to make sure that we included, just a brief discussion about, and really what sparked or gets me thinking a lot about identity from when you were born and when you grew up and when you lived. And that's the difference between the decades that we used to see that doesn't seem to be as clear from a cultural stylistic standpoint. The 50s had a very specific style, and then the 60s had a very specific style. The 70s, and then the 80s, you've got the neons and the pop music and the synthesizers, and in the 90s, you've got the grunge and the goth movement, and then there's not that distinction. And I find that interesting. Why do you think that is?
We talked about this, and I disagree with you to an extent. I think, yeah, we're getting to a point where it's a little bit more gray area. Everything, including the 90s, like 10 years ago, we'd have a hard time putting our finger down on the 90s. I think it's only when you have perspective on the decade that you can really say like, oh yeah, back in the 90s with those MC Hammer pants. I think that you have to have some time away from it and look back on it, and then you can clearly define that decade. But yeah, I think you're right that we may be getting to the point where it's less decade and more like a 15-year period and then a 20-year period. Like things are slowing down culturally because we're in this weird echo chamber type of situation where, if you like Dungeons and Dragons, guess what? You can find that on the internet. You can find all sorts of people that like that on the internet, and you don't have to interact with society. If you like Korean hip hop, you can find that on the internet. You can interact with that on the internet. No, I'm not talking K-pop. I'm talking Korean hip hop.
No, K-pop is sweet.
K-pop is sweet. But anything random, you can find it. You can find other people that enjoy it and experience it in your own community, but it never gets forced into like the public space. Like it never becomes a part of pop culture because you're just kind of in this echo chamber. You're enjoying it with your friends, your online community, or your buddies that you've met that like that same thing. So it doesn't have to like bubble up to the surface through other means. It doesn't have to, one star doesn't have to come up with house music. Well, not come up with house music, but showcase house music. And then everybody likes house music for 2 years,
Yeah, I miss house music and Bad Boy Bill. It was good stuff. Some say that the reason that there isn't the cultural impact is because from 9/11 to 2008 and beyond, the world was kind of in a holding pattern. So there wasn't as much growth of culture. It was more people just kind of hanging on to the norms of the time, and there just wasn't that progression because 9/11 obviously was a big deal, especially in the United States, which arguably drives a lot of cultural influence. I mean,
that's true. I mean,
that's just the nature of it. It shook things up, and then 2008 we had the financial crisis and the Great Recession and all that, and that kind of put us in a holding pattern financially, and there was a lot of stress. So if you think about the times where the culture was very vibrant, it was typically or always in times of economic stability. The 80s, a lot of the 80s were strong economic, and there was a lot of excess.
Yeah, same thing with the 50s and the 60s, but there
was very clear culturally defined.
In the late 60s, you could consider like a giant cultural revolution, and that had a lot to do with the anti-war movement.
Right, absolutely. So that's one thought, and I could kind of buy into that.
Yeah.
And I can kind of buy into what you're saying is you need to get far away from it. However, I still think we would be enough away from, like, I knew what was cool in the 90s, and maybe it's because I'm older, but all I know now is skinny jeans and technology. Like, if I were to define what's cool and what the kids like, it's skinny jeans and technology.
I guess the question is, could you take a hipster from 2005 and put him into 2016 and still have him look like a hipster? Then your argument would totally hold weight. And I think you might be able to do that.
I think you could. I mean, more beards.
Yeah.
More beards.
And more beards.
I'd say that's another thing, I guess, but that's cyclical, right? 70s beards were cool, and that seems to be kind of a cyclical thing.
Beards are always cool.
Yeah, you're right. Beards are always cool. But I think it's one of the major reasons for it is just globalization. And I think your point to, people being able to find their own group based on what they like to do and what they're interested in, I think that's a big part of it too. But I miss that. I miss that identity or that change in decades between, the different styles and things like that. Now you listen to music, and to me, a lot of it sounds, especially top 40 popular music, it sounds the same, repeated over. And I don't think it's because I'm getting older.
Well, that's the thing. That's what I was going to say. That's step one. Part of it is that you're getting older, and that's what my dad said when I was listening to music. But I think that you're right that pop music as a whole is probably less diverse than it was. But I find it easy. There's a app out there, and there's a website too. It's called Radio.
Yeah.
It's RADIOOOOO. So 5
That's a lot of O's.
5 O's.com.
That's like
Or
almost
there's
enough for a bowl of Ripcord Cheerios.
true.
Copyright crushingdefeat.com.
Yeah, not Ripcord Cheerios though. Ripcord Cheerio like mixture.
With
But
pasteurized Cheerio product. Yep.
but this is kind of the opposite of the echo chamber idea. Is it gives you this big roadmap, and you go on to this thing. You pick a decade, so 1900 to now. You pick the decade. You pick if you want fast music, slow music, weird music, or a combination thereof.
Yeah.
And then it just plays music from that country that was popular during that time frame.
Right.
So you can go and see what was popular in Korea in 1980. This sounds pretty sweet. I did not know about this. And for the most part,
Yeah.
I'm just looking at current music.
Okay.
Every once in a while, I go back, like 60s African music is nuts
Yeah.
and
Good
awesome.
stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of, again, it's on the, they didn't have a war going on. Well, that's ignorant of me to say. They did not have a war going on that I know of. There was probably some type of war.
Conflicts.
But there's a lot of culturally diverse music that came out of Africa during the 60s. There's a lot of cool stuff to look at. So that's my recommendation for this podcast, is to check out that website or app. You can get it on iOS or Android.
The radio with the 5 O's.
With 5 O's, yeah.
And that's great. And that's one of the nice things about the digital age is we can reach back and find all of that stuff. So far we've talked about quite a bit today. We've talked about identity regarding your digital footprint in your online or social networking identity. We've talked about generational identity and some of the different, thoughts around that. We've talked about identity surrounding the decades and the differences that existed there. And as always, we're interested in your thoughts. So what do you think? Do you think we're not far enough away from the 2000s or far enough into the 2010s to be able to distinguish what that means to be part of that decade? Do you think that the new generation should be called Homeland? Is that a good idea? Is there enough of a difference between the children being born now or since 2004 where they should get their own designation? Should it be Homeland? Should it be Generation Z? Or are we just still cranking out millennials and kind of that whole generational identity? Or do you think it's all hogwash and there's not enough of consistent behavior or consistent traits or stereotypes to really be able to call anything a generation other than the baby boomers? Do you agree with the Census Bureau that the baby boomers are really the only distinguishable generation that we've had so far? So we'll have those questions posted on the blog under episode 3, identity. And then Dan, the last thing we were going to talk about a little bit was identity theft, but a little bit of a new take on what identity theft is and what it can be.
Yeah, so what's traditional identity theft?
Yeah, traditional identity theft is someone gets a hold of your license or your credit card and they become you in, businesses and take on your identity to steal or get credit cards and they take over your identity.
Okay, so what if somebody, and this is getting into the sci-fi territory of things, what if somebody could actually become you? Because we are now there.
Legitimately, like in my body?
Maybe not in your body, but when I was a kid,
that's good because my body's mine.
I was, but I was like 16 years old. I remember this. I was in social studies class. I remember the class. I remember the teachers. But I was reading a Newsweek magazine, and it was during the O.J. Simpson trial, and they were talking about O.J. Simpson and his Bruno Malleys.
Who's O.J. Simpson?
O.J.
Sorry, that
Simpson,
was my millennial answer. But maybe you should explain for the millennials out there.
Okay. O.J. Simpson was found not guilty of totally knife murdering his wife and her supposed lover back in the early 90s and a super slow Bronco chase that ensued.
Yeah.
It's actually a fascinating trial. It was one of the first weird celebrity, totally out there in media trials that came about. There were the Judge Ito dancers. It was a thing.
Yeah.
He was later found guilty in a civil suit and got sued to pieces, and then had some really weird gangstery stuff happen where he tried to steal memorabilia back from somebody. It is available on the Wikipedia, but yeah, if you don't know about it, I would recommend checking it out.
It's an interesting story. Did you know that O.J. Simpson had his own reality show?
What was it called?
It was
Was it the real
something with
OJ?
OJ or something.
Ain't nothing but the OJ, baby.
It was like punked. So he would go and pull pranks on people, and they were terrible.
This is after the
trial, after everything.
That's fucking horrible.
Yeah.
Why would you want O.J. Simpson to jump out of the bushes and surprise you?
It was
with
around
something?
that time where the more ridiculous you could make the reality show, the better it was. So someone thought this was a good idea to have O.J. Simpson run around and prank people. They set up one that I remember where he was supposedly selling a house. And people would come through the house, and some of the other Confederates, Confederate, like people in on the gag, not Confederate, like people from the South, they would knock vases over in the house, and he would flip out on them. I mean, it was uncomfortable, bad pranks. And it was This American Life that they did a show about it. But I can't remember the name, but I'm sure if you Google O.J. Simpson reality TV show.
That sounds horrid.
They did like one season. You could maybe find it on DVD buried deep in eBay somewhere. But yeah, pretty bad stuff. And every one of them was just so awkward and uncomfortable. But anyway, I digress. So OJ.
There were footprints of Bruno Malley's shoes, and Bruno Malley makes shoes. They make fine leather shoes. There were bloody footprints at the scene. And O.J. Simpson said, "Those shoes aren't mine. I would never wear shoes as ugly as those."
Never.
I may be paraphrasing, but that's pretty damn close to what he said. And this went on for a while during the trial. The trial went on forever. And Newsweek did this thing where they were talking about digital altering of photos. And this was the mid-90s. So it was kind of a new thing. And they showed O.J. Simpson in this picture that the plaintiffs. They had produced this photograph of him walking down the street in the Bruno Malleys, and Newsweek showed 3 different versions, one with him in the Bruno Malleys, one with him in tennis shoes, and one with him in ducky slippers.
Nice.
That they had done, and they looked realistic, and it was done with digital Photoshop.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuck with me, like, what if, you could actually get somebody in hot water over that? So flash forward to about a month ago, I was messing around on Reddit, as one does, and I find this video on YouTube. The video is entitled Real-Time Face Capture and Reenactment of RGB Videos. It was done by Stanford University and a German university called the University of Erlangen-Nuremberg. And what they were doing was they were taking a voice actor, or not a voice actor, but a face actor.
Okay.
They would map his face, and then they would take a streaming video. So it could be, they did Donald Trump and Putin, but they took these streaming videos. So it was happening live, and they were processing it live. And the face actor would sit there and move his mouth and say things, and it would make the video move their mouth in the same exact way. And it was believable.
Like it looked legitimate.
If you weren't looking for it, you wouldn't see it.
Yeah.
And if you were looking for it, it would still be hard to find. And it kind of terrified me a little bit, because the way this stuff happens is they're using, super advanced computers, high-tech servers, high-tech technology.
Yeah.
What that means is in like 3 years, a 12-year-old will be able to get this stuff.
Right.
So what happens when, so-and-so decides that they're going to make a video of you saying that you did X, Y, and Z? They take a video of you and they superimpose some stuff. At that point, they have some, voice altering software that they can do. Right. What can we do to trust that what is represented digitally is true?
All right, so that's kind of creepy and scary that soon the next generation of Photoshop is going to be Video Shop, and you're going to be able to Video Shop yourself onto anybody you want. But
on the plus side, I can just make lightsabers out of my hands whenever I want to.
Right.
Like in all the old family videos where I'm, walking over and giving my grandma a kiss on the cheek. I have a badass lightsaber.
Or those baby pictures we were talking about earlier that are embarrassing. And it's going to be not a little bottle cap, it's going to be an anaconda. if you're picking up what I'm putting down.
You're talking about your penis.
Yes, exactly.
For me,
When I was a baby.
lightsaber.
Lightsaber. Does it make the whoosh whoosh sound?
I hope
Whoosh, whoosh?
so.
There's no better sound, so it would have to. All right, so here's the question. Who would you be now that you can, or very soon, be whoever you want, at least in a video? Who are you going to be?
Me, I'm sweet.
You? Oh, man, I'm going to
Oh,
be...
you mean like who am I going to copy?
Yeah, like who are you going to be? Like who are you going to impose yourself into to make videos of? Like if you can be that person, even if it's just in video, who are you going to be?
I would be Johnny Depp only because
It's a good
I
one.
think it would be hilarious to watch. Johnny Depp is always measured and doesn't usually say dumb shit. Like
Yeah.
everybody says dumb shit. Everybody. Johnny Depp usually has like a very measured answer.
Mhm.
So I would just be Johnny. And if Johnny Depp is listening, which he's not,
Yeah.
but if he were, I have nothing but respect for you, Johnny Depp. I love you. But as a goof, I would make you say such stupid shit.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Well, and plus it doesn't hurt that he's, for a man, a beautiful, beautiful man. So I would be President Obama during the day. So I'd be like, listen up, America, whatever. It's a terrible impression. And then Ryan Reynolds at night. And I don't know, there isn't a way to do a Ryan Reynolds impression. Oh, I'm Van Wilder and I'm Deadpool. I don't know.
Good. You did great. I
Yeah.
believed it.
Those were pretty good. So
Holy shit. Ryan Reynolds is doing this podcast with
know.
me, guys.
Yep, not bad.
You should go to talkobamatome.com
Mhm.
and you just basically type in whatever you want him to say.
And it says
then
Obama back to you.
Well, it takes all of these news clips of Obama
Yeah.
and spits them all back with the words that you said.
Well, it's neat that you brought that up because that's what I think they would use to make that voice legitimate. So like in the new Star Wars, who's the actor that played Obi-Wan Kenobi in the original? Do you know his name? Anyway.
Alec Guinness.
So they took him saying words and then in one of Rey's flashbacks got his voice to say Rey.
Yeah.
So if you listen real close, you can hear that. If you've got enough voice content like the Speak Obama to Me, you can make whoever you want say whatever you want.
I think that basically covers it. I think
Mhm.
we've covered what we wanted to talk about today.
Yep.
There's a lot to do with identity, especially as it pertains to technology. I think that's what we revolved around for the
Mhm.
most part today.
Yeah.
We'd like to know what you think. Please go to the website and let us know.
Yeah. So thanks everyone for listening. Again, this episode number 3, Identity. My name is Blake Richards. With me is Dan Burrington.
Goodbye.
We'll see you in episode 4.